Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome you to this press briefing that we've called to announce the District of Columbia's partnership with the Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial Project Foundation, and also to highlight some of the special events that have been tailored to district residents as a part of the next several weeks of absolutely unprecedented celebration. We certainly look forward here in the District of Columbia to welcoming the hundreds of thousands of people who are expected in the city during the dedication week, which culminates with the ceremonies officially opening the memorial, as we all know, on Sunday, August 28th. I know many of you, like me, are filled with emotion and great anticipation over the exciting things that will happen in honor of Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. The District of Columbia government, of course, embraces Dr. King's vision and his timeless belief in freedom, democracy, and opportunity for all. And we're attempting to connect district residents to the historical significance of the dedication with a special D.C. Residents' Day at the memorial, among other events, and we'll talk more about that. I now want to recognize the speakers who have joined us here today, some of whom probably will join us as the program is in progress. First of all, and fittingly, the first person I will mention is Harry Johnson, who is the president and CEO of the Washington, D.C. Martin Luther King Jr. National Memorial Project Foundation. I'm going to stop now and ask you to give a big hand to Harry because, frankly, he has been the moving force behind this, helping to mobilize people around the nation, around the world. We expect to be joined by our Congresswoman, Eleanor Holmes Norton, who has had such a storied role in the civil rights movement over many years and has been fighting for democracy to come to our nation's capital. We also hope to be joined by her predecessor in Congress, Congressman Walter Fauntroy, who too was with King on many of the journeys that King traveled and was one of his lieutenants in executing the civil rights movement across the nation, across the world. Reverend Willie Wilson is the National Director of the March on Washington that will take place on Saturday, August 27th. Reverend Wilson is best known locally, of course, as the pastor of one of our outstanding churches, and that is Union Temple Baptist Church, Reverend Wilson. Wade Henderson is the president and CEO of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights and the Leadership Conference Education Fund, and has done so much for so many around the cause of justice here in the city and, of course, across the nation. Please join me in welcoming Wade Henderson. Maureen Cooper is the president of the Greater Washington Urban League, and she, too, is dedicated to the fight for D.C. rights and supports our residents individually and through the Urban League in so many ways. And then we'll hear from Ryan Washington, who recently was elected as the youth mayor for the District of Columbia and is just a very, very outstanding young man who clearly has a very important role ahead of him. To get a sense of what happened in Congress when the memorial was just an idea, we were planning to start with Congresswoman Norton, who, of course, is a pioneer in her own right. And when she joins us, we'll ask her to share some of those thoughts with us. But it seems fitting to me to be able to start with the man who has had the perseverance. He has demonstrated all the qualities that I think Dr. King would have greatly admired in helping us to get to this day. It's hard to believe that the idea for this started 27 years ago in 1984. And I think many lesser people would have given up by this time, but not Harry Johnson. So please join me in giving a really warm welcome to the man who has really been the mortar and the bricks on this project, making this happen, of whom we ought to be mighty proud, and I know he is, to see us get to this day and, of course, getting to August 28th. Join me in welcoming Harry Johnson.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you so much, Mayor. Good morning. You all should be so proud to have a mayor such as Vincent Gray. I mean, he is just tremendous. The support that he has given us as a foundation to say that we want to make sure that on August 28th, not just the residents of D.C., but the residents who are coming in from across the world are going to have an enjoyable day. And so, Mayor, we appreciate you for all that you do. His top concern has always been the safety for the citizens of this district and also the well-being of them. So we appreciate you, Mayor. I'm pleased to invite you here today and say welcome to the Martin Luther King Memorial. As the mayor said, you know, over 26 years, I have not been around for 26 years, but over 26 years in the making. And although we may have had some controversy or something, I think what you see, you're going to agree with me, is probably one of the best memorials that's going to grace this mall. To say that finally we have a memorial to a man of peace, a memorial, the first memorial to a non-president, and then the first memorial to a man of color at this magnitude, and then to put him between the Lincoln and Jefferson memorials. I mean, location, location, location. You can't ask for anything better than this. Mayor, I know that when the many people come from around the country and world are going to be pleased to join the residents of D.C. to dedicate this memorial on August 28th. But primarily, let me talk about a great day for the D.C. residents. The mayor has agreed that on August 22nd, we should open this memorial and make it the D.C. Day for D.C. residents to come and enjoy this memorial without all the crowds, but just D.C. residents come and enjoy. And Mayor, I thought that was such a great idea for you to come up with and say, you know, maybe on one day we ought to have it open for D.C. residents. So we look forward to welcoming all the D.C. residents when we do the grand opening on the 28th, but I think on the 22nd, we appreciate you. 23rd, I'm sorry. 23rd, I apologize. On the 23rd, 2-3, we shall have that opening for D.C. residents. And then we shall begin in earnest by opening up the memorial activities on August 24th with an international salute to Dr. King as we talk about Dr. King, the international hero. And then on Thursday, we shall have a luncheon, the Civil Rights Pioneers Luncheon, where we talk about those civil rights pioneers. Many of you are in the audience now. Many will come to join us. Thursday night, a message and music concert. Friday, Women Who Dare to Dream Luncheon. Saturday, National Cathedral Gala Saturday night. Youth event Saturday morning. And then finally, dedication on Sunday. How proud we are to have this memorial dedicated on August 28th, the 48th year after Dr. King delivered his speech. Mayor, residents, thank you so very much.
Thank you very much. And before we hear from some of our other speakers, let me take the opportunity to follow on what Harry started, and that is to really highlight some of the other events. First of all, we've selected a memorial dedication host committee that consists of elected officials, business and community leaders, residents, and just a microcosm, if you will, of the city. They will serve as ambassadors for the District of Columbia during this really auspicious time for us, and I think will help people understand that this is one of the greatest, if not the greatest, cities in the world. The committee is listed in your folders, and I would invite you to go to your folders to see the names of those folks. Some of them, I think, are here today, and if you are a member of the host committee, would you raise your hand so that people can recognize who you are? And thank you all for coming out today. And before we go further, I'm going to invite someone up who is just joining us, who really has a perspective that I think is unlike any other. She was involved in the civil rights movement. She worked directly with King, and she has been a freedom fighter for the people of the District of Columbia. And frankly, I hope we take this opportunity during this time to remind people that what King stood for so fundamentally and so fervently has yet to come to the 600,000 people who live in the District of Columbia. So please join me in welcoming our Congresswoman, Eleanor Holmes Norton.
Thank you very much, Mayor Gray, Dr. Henry E. Johnson, Senior, Reverend Willie Wilson, who are leading our own March on Washington host committee. I want to begin by thanking our mayor for leading the city as we dedicate the memorial to Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr., to dedicate ourselves as residents of the district, the last to be free, to our own freedom. There is simply no better way in the King tradition for District of Columbia residents and for America itself to celebrate our country's achievements toward full equality on August 28th, than to resolve that what Dr. King's life has done for our country must also be done for the residents of our nation's capital. The memorial dedication will lead Americans to measure how much our country has achieved since the 1963 March on Washington. And it is more than I dared predict during the first part of the summer of 1963, when as a Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee worker in the Delta town of Greenwood, Mississippi, and in the second part of the summer of 63, on the staff of the March on Washington, under the great organizer of the march, Bayard Rustin, I did not imagine, as I stood in the memorial near the Lincoln statue and heard King's "I Have Had a Dream" speech, that it would galvanize all that the sit-ins and marches and voter registration and jailings had been doing for the 10 years since the Montgomery bus boycott. The next year, Congress passed the first of the great trilogy of Civil Rights Acts, the 1964 Civil Rights Act, whose central theme was jobs, as jobs must be our theme today. With the establishment of the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission and Title VII of the Act, it was my great privilege to administer just 14 years later. On this August 28th, 2011, I will join millions of Americans, especially my friends from SNCC and the Civil Rights Movement, in their pride that throughout the South, where King did his signature work, African Americans now vote in such large numbers that they have sent to the House of Representatives members from Georgia and Virginia, from Maryland, Texas, and North Carolina, from South Carolina, from Florida, and from the state I most remember, even from Mississippi. But I went south as a Washingtonian, and today my own city is singled out without a vote, standing alone, and without even more, without even the most elementary of rights. We are taxed, but we are stateless, without representation in the Congress that insists that the citizens of this city obey each and every one of its laws and then tithes us to support the national government without so much as a vote in the House of Representatives. Our residents are among the heroic dead buried at Arlington, but unlike the other fatalities, must be counted as having given their lives without a vote. We have a mayor and a city council who just a few months ago felt compelled to take up the King example of civil disobedience for the most basic right to spend their own locally raised, hard-earned taxes as they saw fit. Today, once again, Mayor Gray is leading our city and our country to not only attend the historic Martin Luther King Memorial dedication, but to dedicate ourselves to King's ideals and to King's goals. For we who are citizens of this city, and for those who come to celebrate alongside us, there is an inescapable way to enhance the celebration at this historic memorial dedication. It is simply unthinkable that our country would dare dedicate the King Memorial with the President of the United States himself doing so on August 28th, the 48th anniversary of the March on Washington, without, as a nation, also dedicating ourselves to freedom now, late but now, and statehood for the District of Columbia. I thank Mayor Gray, Dr. Johnson, and Reverend Wilson, all those who contributed to this memorial, particularly Dr. King's own fraternity, who worked for years to achieve a memorial to their brother and our brother. And I thank the residents of the District of Columbia for assuring that the memorial dedication continues to exemplify not only what King stood for, but also for what his life continues to stand for today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Congresswoman Norton, for those words that obviously are undergirded by an extraordinary passion, one that you did not have to read about, one that you experienced firsthand over all these years. And I can't think of anybody who is more suited to continue to help us wage the fight for freedom here in the District of Columbia. So thank you for your continuing dedication, your service, and your perseverance on behalf of the 600,000 of us, including you, of course, who live in the District of Columbia. Thank you, Congresswoman Norton. We have a number of our cabinet members here today. I won't single them out, but they are throughout the audience. And we have two people who will play an instrumental role in the welcoming and the serving, if you will, of the people who will come to the District of Columbia. I happen to be biased. I happen to think that we have the absolutely best police chief and fire chief in the nation, bar none, and they are standing right behind me, Chief Kathy Lanier and Chief Kenneth Ellaby. By the way, later today, at 1 o'clock, you're going to hear some of the exciting statistics about crime in the District of Columbia. We are going in the right direction, and I am proud to work with a chief who has been a leader, who continues to be a leader every day. So those of you who, I hope you will come out, those of you who are here will come out at 1 o'clock to be able to hear more about that. Let me go back now to some of the schedule of events leading up to the dedication on the 28th. First of all, the Martin Luther King Jr. Library has a schedule of events led by Jenny Cooper, who's done such a great job in leading our library system here in the District of Columbia. There will be films, there will be exhibits, and there will be a speaker series also, right, Jenny? And we encourage our residents and, of course, our visitors to take advantage of these special programs to learn more about Dr. King and his legacy. Our residents, time and again, have rolled out the red carpet and willingly endured changes in the normal routines when the nation's capital place hosts visitors from all over the world. So it's fitting that, and Harry pointed this out, that Washingtonians have a special day. And Harry was right. It originally was the 22nd. And we decided not to do the 22nd because that is the first day of school in the District of Columbia. And we didn't want to do anything to interfere with parents getting their kids back to school on that day. So in deference to that, we decided to change it to the 23rd, August 23rd. And it has been designated as D.C. Residents' Day at the National Memorial. And again, I want to thank Harry and the Foundation for working with us to be able to make this happen. Tours will be conducted for residents who have special passes on a first-come, first-served basis. The passes will be available to people after August 18th, and the procedures for getting those passes will be announced next week and posted on dc.gov, as well as being circulated throughout the community. We're finalizing the details to have the passes available online and fittingly also at the Martin Luther King Jr. Library at 9th and G Streets Northwest. On Thursday, August 25th, residents are also invited to the official dedication of the extension of Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue. I'm not sure how many of you know about that, and I want to thank the council, and I especially want to thank Councilmember Marion Barry, whose legislation it was that brought us to the point of symbolically designating as Martin Luther King Jr. Drive the northern end of Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, following along the southeast-southwest freeway all the way to the western stretches of Independence Avenue, which will actually go all the way down to 23rd and Independence. We're going to mount signs. Terry Bellamy and our DDOT staff are working now to have signs up, and we're working to try to make those signs be something really special. We have other symbolically designated streets in the District of Columbia, but we're working to make these signs be something very special. So again, I want to thank Councilmember Barry. I want to thank Chairman Kwame Brown and the entire council for approving this legislation, and I hope all the residents of the city will come down and join us on August 25th for that. I'm also especially pleased that this historic occasion presents us with an opportunity to do what Mrs. Norton talked about, and that is to make real the promise of democracy in the District of Columbia. And frankly, what better moment to seize than this one to further the cause of democracy in the city. In 1965, and a lot of people don't remember this or have read it, in 1965 at a rally in Lafayette Park, Dr. King stated that Congress had been, and I quote, had been derelict in their duties and sacred responsibility to make justice and freedom a reality for all citizens in the District of Columbia. Now that is as contemporary today as it was 45 years ago when he stated those profound words, and we need to use those words as an opportunity to continue to promote justice and equality here in our city. Frankly, I think we all can imagine that Dr. King would not be a happy person about the plight of 600,000 people here in the District of Columbia. And I can imagine him, he'd be, what, 82 years old now? I can imagine him exhorting, urging, pushing, shoving everybody in the District of Columbia and every citizen in the United States of America to stand up for justice and freedom in our nation's capital. And frankly, in the spirit of that, it is time for us in the District of Columbia to be able to do that for ourselves. We've had rallies. I want to see this rally on August 27th be the largest that we've ever had in the spirit of this effort here in the District of Columbia. So in addition to the events at the MLK Library, I want to urge district residents, we'll hear a little bit more about that in a second, to meet on Saturday, August 27th the day before the dedication to meet at 10 a.m. on Freedom Plaza on Pennsylvania Avenue. Anybody in here not know where Freedom Plaza is? Is there any more fitting place than Freedom Plaza to be able to convene for this purpose? Obviously on Pennsylvania Avenue. It'll be entitled the Full Democracy Rally and March. The rally will feature civil rights leaders, supporters, and advocates of self-determination for the district, as well as autonomy, so that we can do something innovative like, wouldn't it be great if we could be able to get the permission to spend our own money in the District of Columbia? What an innovative idea. Wouldn't it be wonderful if we had the authority to be able to make our own laws and have the final approval of those laws in the District of Columbia? I cannot imagine such a forward-thinking idea coming to the nation's capital. I do believe that all the other nation's capitals in the free world already have achieved that. And as we go about the world espousing democracy, why don't we go about the District of Columbia doing exactly the same thing so that we are not hypocrites when we go abroad espousing democracy? The details of the march will be posted. In fact, they already are on dc.gov. And in that spirit, once again, a man who has done so much for this city, he always steps up and leads. He always is in the forefront of bringing justice to our city, and he is the gentleman who will lead the Saturday rally. We talked about the theme for it earlier. Please join me in welcoming the pastor of Union Temple Baptist Church, the Reverend Willie Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Let me just say for a moment to acknowledge the mayor and all these distinguished people who are on this platform here today. Let me first say that theologians talk about certain kairotic points in history where circumstances, situations, people, places combine in such a way that you know that it was only God who did it. We did not have an opening prayer to start this program today, but because first and foremost, Dr. King was a spiritual man, and the foundations and underpinnings of everything he did were motivated and propelled by his belief in a power greater than himself. Because of the great work of Dr. Johnson and all the others in raising the funds to make this happen, and for even the great work of Dr. King, I think we just need to pause and just by putting our hands together, give God some thanks for this moment and the moments that are to come. I was asked by Reverend Al Sharpton to be the national director of the march, which will take place on Saturday, August the 27th. But before I share the emphasis of that and what will follow after that, I'm going to ask Ms. Janae Ingram, who is the D.C. Bureau Chief of the National Action Network, of which Reverend Sharpton is Executive Director, to come at this time and just share Reverend Sharpton's vision for a moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Wilson, and thank you, Mayor Gray, for having National Action Network here. The march is taking place on August 27th, the day before the dedication. And I'm so excited to just be here today and announce the march. The march is being led by the Reverend Al Sharpton and co-chaired by Dr. Franklin Richardson of Grace Baptist Church, and also the chairman of our board, Randy Weingarten, president of AFT, Lee Saunders, secretary treasurer of AFSCME, AFL-CIO. It's being directed by Pastor Wilson, as well as co-hosted by Tom Joyner of the Tom Joyner Morning Show. This is a momentous occasion, and as we stand here and honor Dr. King with this memorial, we need to use it as a time to reflect on all of the things that he fought for and died for, and all of the things that we are still trying to accomplish. That's why this march is for jobs and justice, and we hope that you will join us on August 27th at 17th and Constitution at 12 p.m. to join us in this fight. We cannot let this monument become a signal that the fight is over, but rather a sign that we must continue to fight for all of the things that Dr. King died for and make sure that his dream continues to live through all of us. Thank you, and Reverend Wilson, I'll turn it back over to you.
Thank you very much. Racism has been forever abolished in America. Never again will we have to deal with the issue of color and race in America. That sounds like statements that may have been made and were made by some people following the election of President Obama. But actually, they are quotes from the Reconstruction era in an article by LeRon Bennett in 1981 in Ebony magazine. It followed a time when, of course, we had a black senator, black representatives in Congress, black police chiefs, black mayors, but with the stroke of a pen, all those laws that had been passed to, in fact, make it possible for those who were dispossessed and disinherited to enjoy public accommodations were wiped off the books, and just a few years later, black people were again being lynched in America. And that is to say that history is not always progression, but it is even regression. And it's not automatic that things just get better. When we look at the fact that the median income gap between African Americans and whites in this country is 25 times less for blacks than it is for whites, when we consider that just a week ago a report was given that the black middle class in this America has pretty much been wiped out, and we've been thrown back as a community almost 30 years. It is for that reason then that when Reverend Sharpton asked me to be the national director of this march, I said we need to do more than just march. And so we will be marching from the Lincoln Memorial to the King Memorial, where, because Dr. King was first and foremost a black Baptist preacher, we have invited all religious denominations to share in a service of consecration and blessing of these grounds that will precede the official opening on that, so that as we march and speak to the effort for jobs and justice, for Dr. King, if he were here, would not be standing at a monument, but he would be monumentally standing to make a difference in the lot of the masses of oppressed people and the disenfranchised and disinherited in this nation. So it is our prayer that even as we speak to home rule and jobs and many other issues on that day, August 27th, Saturday at 10 a.m., that all of you will join us, spread the word, and even as we come and take a look on August the 23rd, I think is what the mayor said, that we will come back on the 27th, Saturday the 27th, on the one to reawaken that sleeping giant called the church, which has historically been the moral conscience of this nation, and at the same time speak for those who could not speak for themselves, and be about the business of continuing the struggle, because the struggle is not over. The struggle continues. So we hope that all of you will join us and be a part of this effort on Saturday, August the 27th from 10 till about 2. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Reverend Wilson. And I hope that the twin themes were not lost on you. First of all, justice we've talked about, but jobs. The unemployment levels in some of our cities is absolutely astonishing. I don't know how many of you watched Bill Maher. I watched Bill Maher about a week ago, and one of his panelists made a statement that was astounding to me. She said, "You know, in Washington, I don't think that unemployment is a problem." That's essentially what she said, because they have more jobs than they can fill in Washington, D.C. Well, I'd like for her to come to Washington, D.C. and go to Ward 8, where the unemployment rate is 25%, or go to Ward 7, where the unemployment rate is 17%, and tell that to people who are looking for a job every day and can't find one. So jobs is an essential theme of this march, and it has to be an essential part of our agenda going forward if we really are going to be a just nation and, of course, a just city. I want to ask you to join me in welcoming three people who will follow each other in speaking here. First of all, Wade Henderson, who is the president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights, the Leadership Conference Education Fund. He will be followed by Maureen Cooper, who is such a long-standing leader in this community. She is the president of the Washington Urban League and has done so much it would be impossible even to detail all the things that Maureen has done in and for this city. And then they will be followed by Ryan Washington, who is the mayor youth-elect with the Mayor's Youth Leadership Institute. So please join me in welcoming, first of all, Wade Henderson.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and I want to thank you, Mayor Gray, for that wonderful, very generous introduction, and for the privilege of taking part in this very important event. I want to acknowledge Representative Norton, Mr. Johnson, who has done so much to help make this new monument a reality, to Reverend Willie Wilson and our friends at the National Action Network, and all the other dignitaries who are here this morning, and to the citizens of Washington, D.C. Now, again, I'm Wade Henderson. I'm president of the Leadership Conference on Civil and Human Rights. The Leadership Conference is a coalition of over 200 national organizations which, in the spirit of Dr. King, works to build an America that's as good as its ideals. Now, this is an especially propitious time to recognize Dr. King's contributions to our nation and to study the legacy of Dr. King in helping to move this nation forward. Some have asked why we plan yet another demonstration on this important anniversary. So I thought I'd take just a few minutes to help answer that question and to add to the wonderful wisdom of Reverend Wilson and to those who have spoken before. Now look, our nation is today, as it was in Dr. King's time, at a crossroads of extraordinary significance. We face massive economic upheaval exceeded only by the Great Depression in its impact. We are mired in two wars which sap our strength both in lives and treasure. And finally, we suffer a new level of partisan extremism which elevates political interest over the national interest and threatens the very existence of our democracy as we know it. Now look, if Dr. King were alive today, he'd only be 82 years old. Those who actually knew him perhaps have a special standing to suggest where he might be in the evolution of his views. But most of us didn't know him, and we're left to interpret his legacy based on his past words and deeds. So I'd like to make 3 quick points in telling you why this Martin Luther King Memorial Demonstration on August 27th for jobs, for justice, and the American dream is so important. Now, first, if Dr. King were alive, I have to think he would be pressing the government and the private sector to come together to create a job for every American. It would undoubtedly be his #1 priority. After all, the March on 1963 was about jobs and civil rights, and he knew and understood the importance of a job to every person, every family, and to the country as a whole. He'd be profoundly distressed about the mortgage foreclosure crisis, and he'd know almost instinctively that the relationship between the lack of jobs, home foreclosures, and the growing wealth gap between rich and poor, between black and white and Latino, would be his top priority. And he would also feel deeply the plight of our nation's poor people, and he'd be saddened by the young and old faces of poverty that abound. Now, after all, when he accepted the Nobel Prize in 1964, it was Dr. King who said there is nothing new about poverty. What is new, however, is that we have the resources to get rid of it. It was true then, it's true now, and that's why we march to push these issues. Second, if Dr. King were alive, he would be deeply concerned about the state of our nation's democracy. The debt crisis debacle was an absolute embarrassment, and it was destructive. And the truth is, it obviously is a point that requires attention to be addressed in every significant way. He would be deeply concerned and pushing the public and private sector to try to respond to these issues, and he would be troubled by what appears to be this partisan fight of extremism intended to tear a president down, regardless of the contributions that he's made to the country or to the national interest which supports him. And so that is a problem that has to be addressed, and he would be concerned about it. Lastly, and my other colleagues have spoken, he would be deeply troubled about the lack of democracy in the district. It's a stain on the American flag. It's a stain on the democracy we come to salute. He'd make that a top priority. And then finally, if Dr. King were alive, he would be deeply concerned about the 2 wars that we've continued fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. Obviously, his focus on the Vietnam War at the end of his life parallels his concern and our concern about the loss of life and treasure to support adventures which most Americans believe should be brought to an end. And obviously, he would lift up the men and women who dedicate themselves daily in trying to keep America safe. Finally, he would look at American democracy, what's happening in places like Wisconsin, Ohio, Georgia, and Alabama. He would be troubled about the attacks on collective bargaining and workers' rights. He would be troubled by the assault on immigrants, regardless of their status and where they come from. He'd be concerned about that scorched earth approach. And finally, he would be concerned deeply about this whole issue of voter suppression, which we see in places all over the country. Right now, when people think they have the right to vote, think again, because there are challenges that abound. Now, it's hot out here. This is not the time to give a full-blown lecture. But let me say, it is the time to recognize that Dr. King's dream has not yet been achieved, and it is time to agree that our day of action on August 27th is intended to lift that up and achieve that spirit. Thanks very much for having me this morning.
Short people. Hi, I'm Maureen Cooper, president of the Greater Washington Urban League. And let me just say that you've heard it all this morning, and it is hot. But Dr. King meant a lot to us. And you all sitting in this space ought to know that just by looking around you. This is a group of blacks, white, Latinos, others from foreign countries. This is a time to really, really look around and say, this is my city, this is my country, this is Dr. King's dream. But the dream is still a little bit of a nightmare because some are not recognizing what's going on here. I must say, pat myself a little bit, I am a charter member of this monument. Those of you who don't know what that is, means that you didn't write the check. Now, I know I'm a nonprofit, so I raise a lot of money. So I know that before you leave, you'll accept checks, right?
We do accept checks.
All right. This is our monument. Blacks, whites, all of us coming together, because that's what Dr. King was all about. And you heard the reference to the debt ceiling. Well, Dr. King had said something that we should have put in the hands of all the congressional folks that voted against the debt ceiling. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. To all our ministers in the room, especially my own spiritual leader, Reverend Smith, Shiloh Baptist Church, we have to make sure that we don't allow this country to head towards spiritual death. It is important that we recognize, yes, the poor will be with us, but they don't always have to be the same people. All right. This is a time for us to understand that this is our monument and to support it. Yes, the $1 million checks were wonderful, but your $1, your $5, your $500, your $5,000 will help make this our memorial. King and Whitney Young Jr., who was the national president of the Urban League, worked together way back to make sure that in the early days with President Eisenhower, that we indeed fostered, worked for civil and economic rights of the poor, with emphasis on health and education as the most important parts of the civil rights movement. We have to make sure that that continues. We have to make sure that our young people understand that this is more than just something that happened in the old days. I've heard that a lot from my grandchildren, that this is something happening now. Our young people have to understand that February is not the only month that we recognize Dr. King's dream. Locally, our young people have to understand that this is a place to come to, as well as the Lincoln Memorial, the other memorials that are on this sacred hallowed ground. And I hope that when we do recognize and organize the unveiling, that we do indeed understand what this is all about. The monument is important to this community. We don't have the right to vote, but we can work on it by being a part of this wonderful celebration. I mean, one of the most revered activities of Dr. King's life was the March on Washington. So Washington has been a place where historic things like marches have taken place. And historic things like marches have been a part of the Washington scene. As King had pushed for jobs and opportunities for African Americans and others, this will be an international attraction and indeed will help our financial plight, Mr. Mayor. People will come here and spend money. Spend the money, we tell people. Use your credit card if you have to, but spend the money. I won't say that. All I want to say is I revere Dr. King, and my law school classmates were part of those who went down to Mississippi during those tough days. And I must admit that I am a Mississippi native. I am from Greenville/Benoit. So I understand that this was not just a fabric of somebody's imagination. We could not walk down the streets. We could not try on clothes. There was a lot going on in the state of Mississippi, a lot of negatives. We had as you have heard the song, strange fruit hanging from the tree. That was my Mississippi. My Mississippi is on the move today, thanks to the work, the vigorous work of people like Dr. Martin Luther King. Thank you very much.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ryan Washington, and I'm one of two youth mayor-elects of the District of Columbia. This is Cecilia Thompson. She's also youth mayor-elect. It's a complicated story, but we are all here today to celebrate the dedication of a man who is not only a great historian, as an American clergyman and activist, but one of the most important leaders in the African American civil rights movement. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was a great American. He was a teacher, preacher, and advocate. He was one of the most influential leaders in our nation's history. Despite heartache and countless obstacles, Dr. King continued to pursue freedom and equality. In 1955, during his bus boycott speech, Dr. King said, "As we stand and sit here this evening, and as we prepare ourselves for what lies ahead, let us go out with a grim and bold determination that we are going to stick together. We are going to work together right here in Montgomery. When the history books are written in the future, somebody will have to say there lived a race of people, black people, who had the moral courage to stand up for their rights, and thereby they interjected a new meaning into the veins of history and civilization." On behalf of myself and co-youth mayor Cecilia Thompson, we are extremely grateful for Martin Luther King Jr. leading billions of courageous people that did inject a new meaning into the veins of our history and civilization. Martin Luther King Jr.'s primary goal was not to change laws, but to change people, to make neighbors of enemies and a nation of different races. He wanted racial groups to put aside their differences and acknowledge the principles that unite all Americans. It is important that we appreciate Dr. King's many selfless sacrifices. I'd like to thank Mayor Gray, the youth. I see we have some youth out today, and everyone who came out to support the dedication of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Cecilia and I will definitely be working hard over the next few weeks to organize youth in the District of Columbia to attend activities in celebration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Every young person in this country must understand that if it was not for Dr. Martin Luther King, we would not have some of the opportunities that we have today. So the legacy of Dr. King rests on the shoulders of the youth. Thank you.
Wouldn't Dr. King be proud of our young people? Absolutely. All right, I want to again thank all of you all for coming out. Just before I open it up, I want to say a special thanks to our Department of Public Works employees who are out here today. We have a number of our sanitation workers who have helped to make this possible today, and I hope the symbolism is not lost on anyone. I think we all will recall why Dr. King was in Memphis, and that was he was there fighting for the rights, fighting for the jobs, fighting for justice for sanitation workers in Memphis. So I want to thank our Public Works employees today for helping to make this day possible. Thank you all very much. All right, we are at the conclusion of our formal presentation, and we'll be happy to take any questions for myself or for others who are behind me.
On this subject itself, Mr. Mayor, what are the, maybe the chief or the park police, somebody can comment, or the fire chief, the logistics, given the crowds, what are the plans for the logistics, for buses? What can people expect that day for traffic? Is there just some idea?
I can start.
Okay.
Let me start.
We'll let Mr. Johnson start, and then we'll go from there.
Well, number one, the logistics are that buses can go to RFK Stadium for drop-off, and we will have shuttle buses coming over from RFK. So if anyone wants to get to RFK, they can come over on our buses that we have. I know that certain streets will be closed. I know that the fire chief, police chief, we're working with the park police to ensure that traffic flows. And so I think everything's going to egress pretty well.
Weekend, for example, is Independence Avenue going to be open? I have to drive, that's where I drive home.
It will be open. On that day, it will not be open. But on that day, it will not be open. Yeah. I don't know if anybody else wants to add anything.
Sergeant Slauson.
Good morning. Right now, the United States Park Police, with our partners in the DDOT, the Metropolitan Police, DC Fire, and the National Park Service, are finalizing our operational plans. The Park Police is focusing principally on transportation, public safety, and security of this event. So there's going to be some specifics that are not germane to that I won't be able to address. But I think the important thing is that since this is a plan that's in flux right now, we're just putting the final touches on it. We've got a good plan, but to carefully watch the social media and press releases from the Park Service, the DC government, and the National Park Service. And what we'll do is put out some final plans as far as traffic control, access to the event, public transportation suggestions, and that type of thing. And so the most important thing to keep in mind is that this is going to be a big event, this is going to be a good event, and we have a lot to celebrate, and we've got a good plan that's going to make this happen. Okay, the National Park Service and the United States Park Police does not give crowd estimates.
I wonder why.
Okay. And that line certainly sounded canned, but.
About 250, man. Go ahead.
There's an estimate. There's an estimate of maybe 250,000 people who will be in the city for this. But we also are holding a press conference next Tuesday, August 16th, specifically on logistics associated with the event. So we invite you all back to hear all of those details as well. James?
Just a sense, how much money do you think this event will bring to the city, as Ms. Cooper kind of alluded to?
I have no idea, but I hope a lot. She alluded to the fact that we'll take cash, we take credit cards, we take checks, and yes, if your credit is good, we'll take IOUs also, because we need the money, James. Any other questions? Yes.
On the DC only day, are there certain controls in place to make sure it's only DC residents that can sit about?
Well, people have a ticket. We can't. There certainly is a possibility someone may get a ticket and give it to someone else. We're not trying to be, we're not trying to be overly rigorous with this, but we want to make sure that people who live in the District of Columbia have the opportunity. So we can be sure that they're getting the tickets. If they happen to share them with somebody else, there's not a lot we can do about that. But there will probably be, I don't know, upwards of 20,000 tickets that will be available. So there'll be a lot of people who will be able to come on that day, on the 23rd. John?
Johnson, along those lines, if I understand on the website, you're actually opening to the public on the 22nd, right?
That's correct.
So, therefore, on the 23rd, will public access be restricted to only those people with tickets? And will that be for a whole day or part of the day or what?
8 to 8.
Yeah, 8 to 8 will be the DC day. Is that correct?
Yeah.
And they have passes to get in.
Restricted to only people with passes.
That's correct.
At 8 p.m.
That's correct.
Tom?
I asked the chief, is this going to be an all-hands-on-deck situation?
Yes.
Absolutely. All feet as well.
Mr.
ask a question here. We keep hearing that President Obama is going to be here. Is that a fact? He will be here, and what will that mean for security, general public, everything else?
Well, that's what I read in the paper that he's going to be here. So, no, I read it in the paper just like you. So we're very proud that the president's going to be here to accept this memorial. We're still going to have to go through security, so we're inviting people to come out early. I think Metro is going to open up early to allow folks time to get in, because I believe that the gates are going to close at 10 a.m. So I think it's important for everybody to know that you need to be here to get through the megs so that you can get seated or standing so you can be in the arena here. I think about 100,000 tickets have gone out or will be going out for standing or seating, but then there's plenty of standing room around with Videotrons and Jumbotrons, I should say, and also audio.
Stage for that.
The stage, you see the fence line behind you, the wooden fence, that's going to be the back of the stage. So we're actually going to be over there for the memorial dedication. We will not be here, but we will come over and visit after the dedication ceremony.
Johnson, why are you opening it to the public on the 22nd rather than waiting to the day of the ceremony?
Sure. We talked with the mayor. We talked with Destination DC. We want visitors coming in the city to have a pleasant experience. And we want to be able to showcase and say, you ought to come see it. If you're not here on the 28th, you can't make it, but you want to come and see it. And so we wanted to open that opportunity up for folks who are coming in from out of town, but also DC residents to experience the memorial.
What day will the black scaffolding come down? And
on the 22nd, you'll be able to come and see it on the 22nd without the cloth over it.
All right, thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay, where you want the mayor?
Yeah.